Well, following the year-end interviews for the Edmonton Oilers, both players and staff, we bring in Jack Michaels to talk about every message that we heard over the last 2 days. And Jack, yesterday we heard from the players. Today we hear from head coach Chris Knobloch as well as general manager Stan Bowman. And something that stood out, a key message, if you will, from everyone that we heard from was how much belief there still is inside that dressing room. We look at the history of this team over the last few years. Yes, they've come up short. However, there is still such a strong belief that they have in one another and what they're capable of.
Well, that doesn't surprise me in the least. I mean, just because you lose back-to-back Stanley Cup Finals, it doesn't mean you're that far away.
Yeah.
You're like this.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason this is the hardest trophy to win in professional sports. I mean, Edmonton's played in 211 games over the last 2 seasons. They've won 126 of them. They've won 27 playoff games. And they've come up short against a most worthy Stanley Cup champion. In my opinion, the most worthy champion we've seen in the league in the last 10 years, going back to the third and last of Chicago's trilogy of championships. So this is a team that absolutely should feel it's right there, and that's why you just keep coming back. You keep giving yourself opportunities to finally hoist that cup, because the league is not set up so you can just parachute in. And, I would suggest to you that, Florida's perhaps the most, worthy champion we've seen in a decade. I mean, the hockey that I saw from Florida, and quite frankly, the 2 teams in the first 2 games of this series, was the best hockey I've ever seen live. And I'm not, sitting here making grand proclamations. My opinion is the only one matters. But for me, those are the 2 best games I've ever seen in the Stanley Cup Final. I mean, they were phenomenal. And Florida managed to stay at that level. And really, for the next 4 games, except for the second period of Game 4, Edmonton did not really get to that level again.
Yeah.
And the players talked about that.
Yeah.
But that's more a reflection on Florida than it is on Edmonton. So I think what we heard today from both Stan Bowman and Chris Knobloch is, while there will be subtle changes, this is not a redo. This is not a tear up the script, rewrite it, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I always wanted to see Spy 2. I love the original Spy. They never got to Spy 2. I think it would have been phenomenal. Jason Statham, Melissa McCarthy, Jude Law. I mean, that would have been unreal. And it never got there
Right.
because, they basically just abandoned the project. I think there were problems with the producer. This is not one of those scenarios. I'm obviously using a really twisted and somewhat awkward metaphor, but I think the point is, make some subtle changes and give it a go again.
Yeah.
I think Stan Bowman's goal is clear. We want to play in the final again next year. We want to keep going back. And quite frankly, that's often what you have to do to win a Stanley Cup. There is not usually a meteor type of champion where a champion comes in from out of nowhere, wins, and then disappears.
Right.
That occasionally happens in the National Football League, not in the National Hockey League.
And Stan Bowman said, you know what, we have the pieces. The players yesterday saying we feel as though so many of our players are in their prime. We know that there is still so many years down the road where we have to have these similar runs. So let's talk about how important of a summer this is for the Edmonton Oilers, and specifically General Manager Stan Bowman and his entire team. We got Connor McDavid, Evan Bouchard, 2 very important players, of course,
Right.
that you want to have very important discussions with. And then Stan Bowman, I thought it was interesting today, saying we're going to take a look at our forward grouping, and we're going to take a look at our goaltenders specifically, because he outlined how happy he is with the way that their blue line came together. I know that's a very big question, but what did
Sure.
you make from all of that?
Well, you picked up on the most significant nugget, is where he said the least amount of change will be on the blue line. And I think, at first glance, that might surprise people. But again, you got to look at the salary cap. You got to look at length of contracts, and you got to look at what actually you have.
Yeah.
And, the Oilers' blue line as a collective, I think, is far greater than just looking at each individual player. I think collectively they play well together. I think Paul Coffey over the last couple of years has done a good job of assimilating the pairings so that when there is a switch necessary due to injury or just the flow of play, it's relatively seamless. And as far as changes on the forwards, look, I don't think the season went as Victor Arvidsson or Jeff Skinner might have, preferred in terms of their own individual numbers. That doesn't mean, I'm singling out those two players. But when you talk about forwards and goaltending, obviously you keep taking shots. You keep trying to find the collective that will get you over the top. And again, I mentioned Tampa. You need to look no further. Their best season by far was 2019, and they won exactly 0 playoff games that year. They were swept in the first round by Columbus, went back to work, won the title the next 2 years. Florida won the President's Trophy in 22. Their best record by far. In fact, Paul Maurice made a joke during last year's final. Yeah, I did a great job of coaching my team to 30 points less than we had the year before. They only got in because of a guy by the name of Alex Lyon, who was terrific down the stretch, got him into the 23 playoffs. But again, Florida made some subtle tweaks, altered that sometimes it's the personnel that also can alter how you play. It's not necessarily you needing a different system. It's finding a couple of guys that all of a sudden just subtly shift what the club's strengths and weaknesses are. And we saw that this year, Paige, with Edmonton all of a sudden becoming a much better 5-on-5 club than in years past.
Well, it's an important summer all around. Stan Bowman excited to get to work, and we're excited to see what goes on. And thank you so much for joining us, Jack. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely, Paige, and I hope I've given you pause as far as the need for a Spy 2. I told you the original was good. We need a second one. Now, you didn't expect to hear that when you arrived at the rink today.
Certainly not.
But I'm certainly glad you did. And again, it's a good reminder that that's why you tune into Oilers TV. You never know what subject's coming up.
This is it, folks. This is it right here, Prime Real Estate. Well, we are so excited for what's ahead. Of course, the draft in just over a week, and then it's free agency. There's still so much to look forward to. We hope that you get to rest, reset a little bit during the summer. Jack, you as well. I hope that you get some downtime, and then we'll be back for the brand new season. We'll do it all over again. Can't wait.